Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for taking out the time to be with us today. And thank you, gentlemen, for your time as well. You know, there's something that maybe Gaurav may have mentioned it to you. I'll say it in Hindi, possibly for impact. Enterprise के लिए, company के लिए कुछ काम करना है, CFO को बुला लो. Is that how things are panning out? Maybe, you know, a big picture, if you can, Delhi, if you can mention it. Technology evaluate करना है, CFO को बुलाओ. Business uncertainty है, CFO को बुलाओ. Everything the CFO does. You need to switch it on, yeah.
When we were studying finance, we were told that finance is like breath of an organization. So if we stop, everything stops. So maybe in that parlance, even today in organizations, CFO has that role to understand whatever that is happening in the business, starting from the highest level of business strategy, business model, operational efficiency, and then financial understanding, and thereby finally cost control. And then whatever you are doing, tell it properly to the regulator, tell it properly to the investor, and more so tell it proper to your CEO. I think this gamut of CFO's role has clearly evolved over a period of time, not only because someone who understands both the business as well as the math behind it is going to prove super critical in every strategic as well as operation decision making. So I think that's where CFOs hold that glue together, where you understand the both sides of the business. And as we move ahead in this era of digital and data being available in abundance, I think there is that general reliance that is placed on the CFO to check once, boss, because more so because हमने पूरा हाँ कर दिया, बाद में इसके पास bill जाता है, then he started asking all that questions. So जो भी question उसको पूछना है, let him ask him in the beginning itself. Maybe that's also a reason why CFOs are being dealt with. But on a serious note, I think from a financial governance, finances, to understanding the strategy is the role I see how CFO's role has evolved over a period of time. Because seeing the big picture is very, very important for any professional for that matter, and more so for finance. And that's where I think the boards or the people responsible for running business, I think rightly so, are placing that relevance and then importance to that CFO's role is what I feel.
Prabhakar, in this uncertainty, how do you cleave out, how do you narrow down on a business opportunity? You know, because there are finance professionals here, I thought you could probably explain from your vantage, how do they separate the noise from the signal? I don't know if...
It's an extremely good question that you ask.
But I've done the easier part of the job.
And I also disagree with you on that, because answers can be plenty, but good questions are rare, increasingly. See, I'll just pick it up from what Delhi has just said. This role has become extremely important in the current context of where we are. And to also address the questions that you just asked. I think I came across this book some years ago. The author's name is Pascal Mercier, I remember. He wrote a book called The Night Train to Lisbon. If you have a weekend to waste, please buy the book. 700 pages, a lot of philosophy, but I'll leave it aside. There is one line that stuck to me. That line says, a repetitive use of a particular phrase or a word will dilute its value, erode its meaning. You use the word again and again, the meaning erodes. Say, for example, thanks. You say thanks so mechanically these days to everybody, the meaning of thanks is not there anymore. You don't really mean thank you when you say thanks. So my point is this, the word CFO has been used so many times in the past 10, 15, 20 years that the true meaning has actually been eroded. To Delhi's point, Chief Financial Officer, F is the functional part, but the Chief and the Officer are really important roles to play. Chief is a role of a leader. Officer is the responsibility of somebody who is providing assurance. These two are also equally important. The chief part, the leadership part, and the officer part, which is the assurance part. So what does a leader do? is very simple. Leader simplifies things. A leader provides clarity. A leader uses common sense. That's what a leader does, right? What does an officer do? He assures or she assures that whatever business is being transacted or is being reported as transacted is ethically, legally, morally compliant to the social contract we have signed up for, right? So my point in all this is that now the true meaning of a CFO is really coming out in the world we live in today. It's not only about finance anymore. Finance is a functional aspect of it. Equally important is the role of being the chief, the leader, and also the officer, which is the assurance function. So in that context, the role of a CFO is now very, very important because, on a lighter note, I will say, the role of a CFO today is also, and I'm saying in this forum with a little bit of humor, is to protect the CEOs from themselves, right? One can get too ahead of times, which is what they're supposed to do. So the job then becomes to separate the chaff, right? Chaff of the euphoria from the grain of truth. And that is it's not very difficult. If you wear a jacket and get into the room thinking you're a CFO, you won't be able to do it. But as a simple human being, you walk into a corner and say, what is this business all about, right? What is the true nature of this? If I was running a business, if we were putting money in something ours, how do we treat it? It's very simple. Of course, there are Excel sheets, there are sort of, models, there are so many metrics that you can track, models you can build, but ask the same question to ourselves. If I was putting money into the business, what will I look for into this? The answer becomes very simple. So to me, it is now going back to the first of being a chief financial officer, to apply common sense, to apply sort of, the simple thinking behind the first principles, to go separate the chaff from the grain. And that is the role of the CFO today in the organization, to be the conscious keeper of the org, and the custodian of the organization's value that Delhi has rightly said. The board reposes this confidence on a CFO. In fact, a board member once told me, in all due fairness, that a good board would like to keep a good CFO close, but a good CFO much closer.
Oh, fantastic point that you made. I just am reminded of something that happened in 2013. Companies Act decided to make CFO as one of the key management personnel. So that, from an indication, legally, possibly could have been one way that India was moving. So I'll take the next question to you. And I'm reminded of the old saying, ideas are probably a dime a dozen, execution is the real thing. How does in the light of something that I'm asked, Delhi, so many noises that you hear, how does the CFO get his mind or ensure that his mind is focused on the execution and hence the result? If you'd like to probably add your point.
First of all, thank you for having me here. And Prabhakar, I'm sure at some forum I will use this analogy that you explained of CFO, because that was really an eye-opening for me as
fantastic
well.
One, fantastic
in terms
one.
of breaking it to 3 words. And so to your point about there is enough and more proposals that comes, and how do we evaluate, focus on the execution part to its end. So I'll just pick from where Delhi Babu mentioned, right, that finance is one function where everything converges. So all other functions can operate in their own vertical. But finance is a function where in the end everything has to converge, because everything has to form part of the financial statements, whatever is reported both internally and externally. So from that point of view, we are able to assess and evaluate that what is the potential impact, because ultimately in the end everything is about ROI. ROI is tangible, ROI can be intangible also. But we have to decide in terms of the prioritization as to what is that particular one thing that we want to drive, which will align to our different stakeholders in terms of the various metrics that we may have. Stakeholders can be internal, stakeholders can be external. So right now, as you may be aware, that labor codes is the buzzword. So maybe there are a lot of internal projects which are running in the organization, but everything else is taking a backseat. But we have to focus on the labor codes to take it to its desired outcome, because otherwise we can have both financial and non-financial outcome in terms of reputation, etc. of the organization. So now once we have decided as to what we have to do, then we have to create a cross-functional team to ensure that everybody understands their responsibilities in terms of whatever is required to be done, get the buy-in from the board, get the buy-in from the necessary stakeholders, and then ensure that everybody is assigned due responsibilities with somebody who is acting as a pivot to ensure that whether we are on the right track, somebody is deviating, then how do we bring that person on in line, and then take it to the right end, along with ensuring that whatever are the checks and balances that are implemented in place.
Ankur, that big picture that we're trying to understand is so important for the education and the skilling part for the country. Again, from your point of view, if you can explain, how does that show up in terms of numbers and from your finance understanding and the results ultimately? You handle, I mean, if you can also explain the scale at which you operate.
Good evening, colleagues. Thanks for the opportunity. So, big picture is something which every CFO is expected to have and also to look at when taking all the decisions, and particularly from talent and skill augmentation perspective. The big picture plays a very big role because you are not looking at what's happening today, you're building your organization for the future. So in the process, it is to give an example, in my business, we have around 1,200 branches running with 900,000 plus students with massive scale. We run buses more than any state transport. So the kind of scale we have, like we have close to around, say around 150,000 plus students studying in residential campuses where we have to make breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks for these guys. So when we look at all this, it's a very human resource oriented work at the front end and also at the back end. So for us, we always look at how to optimize technology, what kind of technologies we can use, and how we will cross-skill and upskill our teams in various manners. Like we don't restrict the finance to do only the finance job. The finance looks at supply chain, part of the HR and operations kind of roles, and logistics activities. So we work on cross-skilling those talents and optimizing the resources. So we focus more on optimizing those fixed cost elements. So upskilling becomes more important from operations perspective. From education industry perspective, it's transforming every day. By day, it's transforming at a rapid pace. Today, at some point in time, coding was optional, or learning about computers was like, okay, you start at 8th, 9th grade or something like that. And people used to, in our times, we used to go and sit in computer labs and play Pac-Man kind of games. So now at early stage, from 7th, 8th grade, kids are being taught about exposed to coding. So now that is evolving at rapid pace, and we are augmenting our technology and backend to support these 900,000 students and be ready for the future challenges.
Gaurav, the digital capability, and that's where tomorrow's banks are headed, being very nimble digitally. How is that execution going to change the industry, which I'm sure, as somebody who looks at the numbers at AU Small Finance Bank, you'd like to drive and maybe raise the bar as well?
Yeah, so I think we say, or it's said that...
and I must add, sorry to interrupt, AU is a listed company, so I don't want any numbers, financial numbers, but you know the broad picture.
Yeah. So I think banking industry is all about technology, and the developments we have seen over the last few years in terms of public digital infrastructure and the businesses that have been built on top of that, whether it's the payments infrastructure or, I mean, all the banks have very modern architecture. And similarly, AU being, you could all say, a new kid on the block from a banking perspective. At 8 years old, we have had the, say, fortune of, using cutting-edge technology at both the back end, the middleware, and the customer or employee-facing technology. So, and that has really enabled us to what was, once a feet on the street kind of model to become more and more automated with the use of modern technology. But I think, technology is ever evolving, as we all know. And with the advent of AI native, capabilities and stuff, I think there's a lot of things that can be done. And I would think that, technology would continue to transform financial services and perhaps enable us to reach in the farthest nooks and corners of the country and be able to underwrite loans digitally with very little paperwork in the future.
Yeah, the way loans are being given, like 10 minutes, get a loan approved in 10 minutes. So it's certainly technology enabled.
Yeah, and I'll just give you an example. So we are, working on various AI use cases, and one of them is on the loan onboarding software for gold loans, for example. In another quarter or so, we'll come up with an app which is basically AI-driven, where all you have to do is take a photograph of your PAN, Aadhaar card, and your jewelry, and just give an approximate caratage that you remember. And all of the underwriting would be done on that basis. You'll get a loan which is pre-qualified or sort of soft pre-approved, or all you have to do is take your jewelry to the branch, get it valued, and then you get the disbursement. So I think that's the direction of travel.
So it reminds me of a Bollywood song. And if I may innovate on that, Sona de do, paise le lo. Okay, that's on the lighter side. Joote de do, paise le lo. That's the song. But on a serious note, if I were to ask you, Prabhakar, how does that, when you speak to companies, what is driving that change which makes a strong business case for you? In the sense that companies want digital skills, and even to you, Ballav, how do you build that skill for companies and globally? That's what partly you do. What is that skills that you're building for them that can probably digitally disrupt industries? Because that is as good as commodities. Often, and that is, I should say, often commodity-like.
No, absolutely. So in fact, I have a confession to make, which actually makes me feel like a bit of an imposter in this forum, because I've been in finance only for 2 years, actually 2.5 years. And prior to that, I was running business. I came from a business background previously, and for all my sins, I was an engineer by education. So please take my comments with a bit of a pinch of salt. But all I will say is this. The best way, in my opinion, to influence, to encourage our colleagues to take up the technology path, digital being a part of it, technology is a journey. What was Stone Age tools subsequently became steam engines, subsequently became IoT, subsequently became today what we call as intelligence or whatever we have. It's all technological evolution. The best way for somebody to influence colleagues towards technological journey is to become somebody fluent with it oneself. If we cannot invest our time learning whatever we are trying to ask people to do, people will definitely not see the value in it. So if it takes time for a lot of executives in this room, including all spend time learning about a tool or a technology, we have to do that first. We have to try it first ourselves. Unless we make an SAP entry ourselves, we will not know how the system will work. The same thing today. Unless you learn a tool yourself, you will not be able to influence anybody. Once you do that, and what I've seen very beautifully is that a lot of us in this room are capable of simplifying things. Then we can simplify what this tool can do in a very simple message, and we can tell people this is exactly what it does. It's not really a hype. It's something that it really do. And that I've seen really helps people to get onto the bandwagon faster than later. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing you asked me is what kind of skill is what we are trying to promote in the world today, right? a bit of a contrarian view on that, and I'll share this in this forum. If you define skill by the capability to use a tool, I would, okay, fair enough. That's the way of defining a skill. But the true capability today that I think that we all and the generations coming ahead of us have to master is the ability to go to first principles, not be caught by the tool. The tool is a tool. By definition, tool is an extension of yourself. A tool cannot be driving you. You have to drive the tool. So the current and the future generations, in my opinion, have to get back to the first principles of whatever it is once again. The why, the what, the where, and the how. A tool will do its job. It was Excel day before yesterday, it was SAP yesterday, today it's some other tool that everybody will launch. These can be learned. But if we let go of the ability to get to the first principles of anything, we're going to be lost. We're going to be lost at best. At worst, we stay where we are, and that's the worst thing to ever happen.
Balav, also teaching companies the principles to probably be digitally ready and digitally execute, and you do it across industries. How do you convince as a finance leader, because it's more efficient for the finance leader to do it. Ultimately, the finance leader is to sign the check.
Repeat the question, I don't think I got the gist of it.
So, for a company like Hexagon, to make sure across industries you help companies be more savvy digitally, how do you convince that the numbers are not stacked up against, once you make a capital expenditure? How do you convince companies that this is going to work smarter for you? Ultimately, the finance leader.
See, so the first thing about the customer is that, are we trying to sell to the customer, or are we trying to understand the problem of the customer and trying to solve the problem? Many a times where people or the organizations go wrong is we have something and we want to force fit it, versus to what Prabhakar just said, are we looking at that what, how, why and where part of it? That from a customer point of view, are we trying to understand the customer's problem statement and trying to address that? And that is where the big picture thing emerges, that as and when we start understanding the voice of the customer, trying to understand the need for it, trying to solve that problem, or help them understand that that problem is actually not a problem itself. Maybe they are looking at things from a different lens. We should start looking at things from a very different lens per se. Ours is a software company. So we have services also as part of our business, but that services is mainly to support our own software. We don't do third-party services as such. So the big part of the organization is also linked up with the product management team, where the product management teams are front-ending with the customer to understand as to what is their need, what is the market doing, what is the competition doing, what is the deficiency in our own product, to fix that, versus trying to keep innovating, keep upgrading our products and trying to go and force fit into the market. Because then we have made the investment, but we will never get the desired ROI from the product. So that is one thing which is very important. Another thing I just wanted to add to what Prabhakar just mentioned, that many a times when we are purely talking about skills, in an IT world, we always link it back to digital skills or the technology related skills, technical part of it. But the big thing that is going to come up in future, at least my belief, is the behavioral skill enhancement. Because technical part, and particularly that has come up, we are talking offline as well, that pre-COVID people used to come to office. So automatically we were all working together and learning from each other. Now most of the organization operating in a hybrid environment. People don't come to office so often. So naturally that learning from each other has significantly reduced and everything has become task oriented. I am given a task, I can complete the task and matter is done. In future, after a couple of years, if you have not learned all those skills, whether you are in a customer facing zone or you are just managing a team, you will start having a difficult time because social skills will start getting impacted and that will start reflecting in how you go and sell or how you deal with anybody, whether internally or externally.
So, yeah, please. So I was just going to add to that, transaction is not always important. Learning the skill to handle that, execute that transaction becomes critical. Prabhakar.
Good question you asked and a great answer that Bala has given. The question is today about how do you come up with a model that justifies investments that you make in tools and technologies in a way that you don't throw the baby away with the bathwater, quite simply put. So what I have seen good leaders do is this, and I give you a live example in my own company. We use a tool to do all the contract validations. A contract comes in, and then the process, there's previously a workflow. Point A, point B, point C, point D, a legal counsel checks somewhere, and output is there from the contract. Now we automated the workflow. And then there is a proposal for us to go and implement an artificial intelligence tool which actually will do the contract validation. So the first question we asked ourselves is, when we actually invest in this particular tool, can we evaluate more contracts next year with the same manpower capacity we have today? Right? That's the first question. The answer was yes. And the second question was, how many? Then we came with a concept called the digital FTE. We said you have X number of FTEs today in the legal team. You're investing in a tool that will actually accelerate the evolution. So it is taken as a digital FTE now. And you do the budgeting accordingly. You say my manpower cost is going to be not only A plus B plus C, but also my digital FTE. And output is going to be that much. It's a very simple format. Instead of previously we used to do manpower cost is different and the tool cost is different.
Correct.
Right? So technically we were increasing manpower and also increasing the investment in the tools. Now we're saying, okay, now make a complete manpower-based budget. Everything is an FTE. Come up with the numbers and come up with the value you can create next year. That drives a discussion down to the actual tangible value that you can deliver next year. There's one example that I have, which I wanted to share in addition to what Bala has said.
Sure. Maybe if I can add a couple of sentences. While digital tools focus is one thing, from a CFO's decision-making point of view, every time a project is brought before him, we will say this is the payback, this is the IRR. So one interesting conversation that at least I had with my chairman at least is there was a given project where there was a given set of financial ratios. Then I told him, boss, there is no way I can allow you to spend anything more than X. But he was asking 2X of it. So when a CFO is looking at purely as a finance numbers, then obviously my stand is correct. But when the other entrepreneur is looking at not today's problem, I mean, he's actually looking into the future and why it makes sense to spend what he's planning to spend and what is the intangible advantage it will drive. For example, one of the points that he explained was, when a customer visits my premises, visits my factory, what is it that makes him to buy from me? It's not about me giving at the optimum cost, it's also that assurance that I provide through the infrastructure and capability that I have created, that my service will be of top-notch quality. So for you to really understand from finance, whenever we sit, we always engage into this discussion, boss, payback kitna hai, IRR kitna hai. Beyond payback and IRR, this intangible value that gets built into the company. For example, many of the ESG initiatives these days, there is a tendency for all the CFOs to first ask them, boss, kyun karna hai ye? I mean, why should I replace an IC engine vehicle with an EV vehicle? And I mean, obviously EVs are TCS are high, and then why should we do this? But it is important to put this in the context, not that we can allow something just for the heck of it. For example, somebody comes to me with a software tool saying that, boss, this is a tool you buy, and then you will be able to reduce, I mean, what is they call? They say that you can remove Excel sheet from your company. ये बात तो मैं पिछले 20 साल से सुनता आया हूँ. बस आप ये ERP इम्प्लीमेंट करो, एक्सेल का कोई जरूरत नहीं है. ये क्लिक में आपका पूरा बिजनेस का ज्ञान दिखाई देगा आपको उधर. वो कभी हुआ नहीं है. So the problem is, so while we play as much importance to really push and then make everything tangible for us to really sign up on a particular project, it's equally important for a CFO to really understand the intangible. This is where, I mean, making sense out of the noise comes in. For example, many times a project report will come and say, boss, mera targeted market hai na, itna hai, 1 billion. Out of that, 100 million to bej dunga. That's the most bullshit that every marketing guy sells, including me. Even I was selling loans at some point of time in my life. So target market will never give you sales. It's your core competence that gives you the sales. So a CFO, when he drives the business discussion from what's the core of this organization and what is it that it is trying to address, is when he is actually bifurcating the noise from the content. So understanding the intangible, calling out the noise whenever it needs to be called in, and at the same time getting glued onto what is the overall objective behind which the organization is running. Balancing these three is something that a CFO must do these days, because everybody is running behind. It's not like, I mean, even today in stock market parlance, people want valuation just like that. बस कल स्टार्टअप शुरू किया, आज मैं यूनिकॉर्न बन गया. कैसे बन गया रे बाबा? 20 साल से कोई रगड़ रहा है उधर. वो बना नहीं है अभी तक.
And no promoter is happy. They think the company is undervalued.
This question comes to me in every board meeting. Boss, you are a guy who is earning so much free cash flow and you are at a PE of 20. As somebody who launched a startup and his PE is some, I don't know, I mean maybe infinity or 440
How do
or
you
whatever.
value a loss-making?
So I think it is important for us to really, I mean, hold this, what do I call, whenever people are flying, bringing them onto the ground and then say, bhai sahab, thoda baito, sabar karo.
Thoda baito.
I think that's, I mean, while I'm trying to put it little humorously, because end of the day, these are all people who are doing whatever I am saying on a daily basis. But I think these days, even with the software tools, sorry, I'll just take 30 seconds more. Even on the software tool, please don't use scalpel for digging a well. Scalpel is a super good tool, but वो गड्ढा खोदने के लिए नहीं है. So it is important for us to, even in the digital transformation journey that we are all going through, you have to identify what tool is right for what purpose. कोई आके बोलेगा, I will give you an artificial. See, one more important point is, in a chat GPT kind of a scenario, तुम कुछ भी पूछो, वो कुछ भी बोल देती है, ठीक है. But in an organization scenario, each CFO has an additional responsibility, which is explaining every decision that we are taking as to why we have taken. We can't say that boss ChatGPT ने बोला है, या मेरा ये algorithm ने बोला है. Even if algorithm is written by me, I can't blame the algorithm, right? So explainability, building explainability into everything we do is the most critical thing. That's where employing any digital tool, we should not miss this essential element and simply go by some tool that is being sold by somebody saying that I built a beautiful algorithm. ये पूरा तेरा physical verification एक दिन में दे देगी. कैसा देगी मेरे को मालूम नहीं है. उसने actually बोला हाँ everything is found correct. What is found correct? Store में जाने के बाद ही पता चलेगा ना. So I think this is
fantastic point you've made, because some of that hype needs to be controlled as well. Gaurav, I thought you wanted to say something.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
No. So on a lighter note, some of you may have heard it, that there was a conversation between a CEO and a CFO. And the CEO mentioned that we need to invest X amount of dollars in upskilling our employees. And the CFO asked that, what if they leave? And the CEO's response was, what if we don't invest, and what if they don't leave? So sometimes that is the intangible factor that we have to keep in mind, because it's not always about the immediate ROI. We also have to look at the long-term sustainability of the current ROI that we are earning.
And that's what I wanted to ask, maybe, Gaurav. That hype, the technology hype part that Delhi Babu referred to, and the reality of what the outcome is. That hype cycle which Gartner calls, that needs to be, I mean, companies need to be more grounded than the hype that technology companies tend to do.
No, absolutely, and I think we can all relate to that Excel example, right? That so many things have come and gone, and Excel is still there. And I think that is something about, I mean, just delivering value, right? Delivering sort of value that is people can see, and the flexibility. And the biggest thing is, I mean, we are all always selling in one way or the other. So are the tech companies, right? But at the end of the day, it's buyer beware. And, you can't dig a well with a scalpel, for example, as was just said, right? So you have to be very cautious of what are the outcomes you want, and whether that particular technology or tool is the best that you are aware of. What is the implementation times? What are the complexities? Can you do a POC or, so just the usual sensible stuff, and not assuming that, this is a panacea for all your troubles and this will come and then the world will suddenly be a better place. So I think that kind of stuff. And just sort of adding to some of the other points around the role of CFO and, whilst numbers, analytics and being right and reliable and all of that is there, but just managing the softer aspects or the behavioral aspects of that, because very important at the boardroom level when you're talking to maybe your, founder, CEO, external stakeholders, because sometimes it's not just logic alone. How do you persuade people? How do you influence people? And what, switches you press at what point of time becomes equally more important, because most of this job, or for most senior roles, behavioral aspects are probably as important as, if not more important.
Yeah, you want to, Hamkar?
I agree with both Dilip Babu's point and Gaurav's point. We recently came across one scenario where we had this techie guy who came to us and said that, okay, we'll solve this problem, we'll implement AI, so AI solution, we'll bring in AI and all your problems will go away next day. So we said, okay, then we started evaluating. Then we called a couple of guys and asked. Then we said, so okay, we have thousands of transactions and there is somebody doing a manual entry. Do we actually need that level of AI deployment on this? Okay, so there are like solutions like scalpel to dig the well types. So we could address by writing a small bot, RPA. So we had one more consultant come in. So choosing the partner, like most of the time we look and approach consultants to solve our problems. So we become their guinea pigs. Okay, they have their technologies and they don't have use cases, they don't have data, they don't have real life scenario. Who is the real life scenario to test? We are their guinea pigs. Now we need to be very careful about evaluating, okay, whether we are being a guinea pig, whether we are using them or we are getting used by them. That's one thing which we had to evaluate, and we dropped the idea of AI. We went to opted for a simple RPA. So that is one thing is very important. Second important is that the behavioral aspect. Whether your organization, your teams, your colleagues are ready for this transformation, whether they're mentally ready, and what are their apprehensions, what are their concerns, what level of transformational journey we are in. So while somebody wants to sell their AI tool to us, whether our systems, underlying processes, underlying transaction management systems, and our colleagues and our customers, are they ready for this? These are the two aspects which we need to evaluate. Otherwise, these kind of softwares and tools will just become vanity and fade away over a period of time.
Okay, let me open the floor for a few questions. Anyone, before we move ahead, anyone, if you have any questions specific to the finance leader's role, happy to take them. Okay, we'll wait for your questions, so give them. You may want to note it down, maybe, in a little while when there are more questions as well. And come to the expanding role. You were talking of sustainability part. Now, the law requires you, SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, requires you to track some of the emission and some of the targets that have to be met as per SEBI's guidelines. What are some of those challenges the CFO faces? Because ultimately, there are some, if I recall correctly, more than 170 parameters on which you have to report. And that's the number, or is it higher than that?
Yeah, in the BRSR reporting framework, they are asking us not only to look at what is your emission, obviously you have to get into tier 1, tier 2, as well as understand how much is the ultimate. I mean, see, this whole journey started with the concept of integrated reporting in terms of understanding what are you taking from the nature and what are you giving back to the nature. So from that angle, today SEBI asks a humongous amount of data to be, I mean, first of all, even to ensure the accuracy and also authenticity of the data will become a challenge. I think getting the partners on board, particularly we buy roughly from about 3,000 vendors, bringing them into a forum and then telling them how to measure what they are doing, what is the emission that the norms that we need to meet, and what are the renewable energy targets that we are running, and how they can also actually participate and then run behind those targets, is something, a coordinated effort that is actually, I mean, taken in the right spirit by many conglomerates. It becomes challenging for someone in the manufacturing side of it, because it is not easy. On one side, there is humongous amount of cost pressure that you need to bear in mind. At the same time, engage your partners in a manner that they are able to collaborate with you. For example, we have actually, I mean, ESG is not only about only the emissions. There is also about, let's say, employee safety, or even the governance related matters. So when we actually engage with all the vendors on their own employee well-being, because we buy a lot of metals which are not very environmentally friendly, and it is our job to ensure that even those employees who are working with our vendors are also not actually getting harmed out of it. So some of these initiatives, when we start, initially, obviously there is that, boss, ye sab karne ke liye itna lagta hai, tu dega kya? That's the first question. But I think over a period of time, when you sustain that effort of convincing them that there is merit in doing what we are doing, and eventually it is actually flow back into the organization, I think to that extent corporates are making reasonable success. But yes, the data challenge with respect to understanding these parameters and tracking them year on year, setting the targets and measuring yourself against the target has become maybe not as big as the financial accounts, but there is also another large set of data parameters that companies are monitoring today.
So 3 years, it's just been 3 years that SEBI has made it mandatory to report that data. Gaurav,
Yes.
would you like to add to that, particularly the challenges that ESG, and tomorrow it will come to you as a lender, what kind of businesses you are lending to? That will become, investors could be asking that question.
I think that question is asked even today, because ultimately what is the risk embedded in your financial statements or loans and advances, and who is the ultimate customer, and what are the economics of that customer, right? So that's relevant. That has always been relevant, not to, I mean, ever since the lending industry was born, I guess. And getting access to some of the underlying data on emissions, on sustainability, or the impact that your lending is creating, especially in the semi-urban rural areas, that that will, I think, continue to be important. How you measure that may become more, maybe more automated when you have access to some of these climate and other data or emissions, and or how do you calculate it? Right now, when we do that, there is a bit of manual work and a lot of assumptions and judgment involved in that. But I think that will evolve over time.
It's interesting that you're mentioning, and to the 3 other people, I'd like to ask the question.
Maybe on a lighter vein, I want to differ with what Gaurav said. They'll ask all the sustainability question, and when you ask them, boss, एक quarter कम कर दोगे क्या? नहीं. उधर मेरा net interest margin वो जो भी वो अलग है, वो अपने जगह वो सही है. तो तुम sustainability करो.
I want my ROI on return, but I also want you to do good work, right?
So the NIM is something that everyone tracks. So anyway, so what I was trying to understand.
Just on this, just to add, right? So this is actually, so we have a product called Green FDs, where customers can choose an FD, and that FD only gets deployed in green assets like renewable energy or EVs and all of that. And we can't even drop 10 paise lower on that FD. No one will take it, right? So we have to match the price of a normal FD, and then we have to say, okay, but this money will only be earmarked for clean energy purposes. So that's the point you were making. Yeah.
Innovation. So to the 3 gentlemen, my question is that, so right now the SEBI regulation is for 1,000 companies, listed companies. sooner or later it's going to come for private companies. How are we preparing? And as finance professionals, how do you evaluate that part? Because not every data, in the case of privately held company, and these two are public companies. So how do you evaluate that data? How do you push for that change and make sure that you're meeting the regulation as well? And particularly the two companies here, they are global companies. So we'll come to you, sir.
So, like Gaurav said, that today, of course, we are privately held in India, but globally we are listed. So we do have to report more, not from an India point of view, but provide inputs to the for the global reporting purposes. But is there a scientific method that we have today? Answer is no. That is based on a lot of manual effort and significant amount of assumption. So having said that, tomorrow, if it starts getting mandatory for privately held companies within India, are we geared up for that? While I'm talking today, answer is no. So it's a journey that we have to walk upon to get prepared for that, whether in terms of some in-house tools which can be implemented, which can start tracking that, or if in the marketplace there are some tools which are available, which can be readily be deployed within the organization. We have to work towards that, because today, most of the thing that we are doing is working around it, but not really into the thing, except CSR, which is more mandated by the law for all companies here. So that is something that we are doing it very proactively for our organization, that may be contributing to the S part of it in the ESG thing. And that is something which is actually working reverse, that what we are doing in India, our global setup wants to replicate that, because they have understood that we are doing it in such a structured manner, which is not happening across the globe anywhere else. So that is working in our favor right now, but on the larger ESG, it's a journey that we have to walk upon.
Haimakar, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I have been through these environments earlier, so I have come across a lot of challenges. I agree with Bala, where it becomes extremely difficult to capture this data. First, what data is available at your disposal and what you can can get from your partners. So if today large-scale private entities are also mandated to implement this, then it's going to be a nightmare. And particularly for organizations which have spread across the country with 1,000 branches and all, and different states, different locations, different type of usage of power and all that, it's going to be a real nightmare. I agree with him, it's a 3-4 year journey easily.
Prabhakar, some of the companies which are listed in other parts of the world, they probably have found a way to do it. I'm aware of some of the multinationals. I don't know how much they can report, but to the parents, I'm sure, to the parent company they do. How do companies prepare, and how do finance professionals, and here there are a lot of finance professionals, how do they prepare for that?
I have to admit, in our case, the challenge was a little easier to handle compared to the manufacturing industries, because we're a services organization. And we've also been doing this reporting for no less than 7 years now, in a similar format, if not the same format that is being asked for now. So, so for us, we're in a better place compared to rest of the industries in India, so to speak. But also to your point, when we work with clients from the West, especially, they have a very specific lens they apply on how they see their partners run their businesses. They also rely on third parties to come and audit us, and they come with those frameworks of what to look for, where to look for, and how to validate the data. It's very important to learn from them as to what they're looking when they audit us from that perspective, and take the knowledge back into the business. That's the second thing I'll say. The third thing I'll say is that we've been doing it from the past is just sort of serendipity. That we are people to learn from is where we are today. But going forward, unless we make this concept that we will not take from the society and nature more than what we were willing to give back as a part of our purpose, if we do not do that, we will continuously have this problem. So my opinion is that businesses have to take that as part of their purpose, that to Delhi's point, that we will not strive to take more from the nature than what we're willing to give it back. then everything falls into place. If IRR is what we are built as a purpose, then obviously we deliver IRR, right? That's how we are configured as a business. But if this purpose is also this, I'm sure we'll figure out a way to get that done in the future also.
But
Just to add to his...
On that point, this is sort of a problem which market forces cannot solve, because it's game theory. Anyone who does that will not be in business, right? So non-market forces need to come in and add, right? Because otherwise it will just not work. It won't last. That company won't last.
Yeah, I was just about to say what Gaurav was saying, that it's a catch-22 situation, chicken and egg, that ultimately, like he was talking about the interest rate, that if he reduces the interest rate, there'll be no takers. So automatically he has to maintain the interest rate. So it's more about the ecosystem problem. In the ecosystem, if everybody starts following the same philosophy, then it is a sustainable solution. But if somebody is trying to outsmart the other, that okay, if you are going to give 0.1% less and I can generate more business, then Gaurav or somebody like Gaurav will be forced to match it up. But if everybody starts offering 0.1% lesser, then it's no more about one versus other. It's an ecosystem. Everybody's operating that only. If you want to invest in green FDs, that is the only interest rate that is prevalent, and take it or leave it.
If I were to add one point there, see, some of the sustainability initiatives are actually making a lot of meaning to the business. For example, we have implemented what is called as Vitality Index in our company. There is an annual medical examination that happens, and then we start going through, there are multiple tests that will happen depending on the age bracket what we have. And then also correlate the data with how many sick leaves our employees are actually taking, and what is its impact on the overall productivity. Because in a manufacturing system, if I were to get an alternative for weekly offs, that's fine, because I know in which day he will go off. But if natural absenteeism, if it increases beyond, let's say, 10% or 5%, then it becomes very, very difficult for anybody to really replace that manpower very quickly. I think there is a lot of economic sense built into some of these initiatives. Similarly, when we looked at the water problem, today we are, in a matter of when all these zero liquid discharge processes were not fully run, considering they were always looked at as a cost. But over a period of time, though we have the facilities, we do run them, when focus started increasing on them, suddenly we realized we were actually water positive for the last 10 years, and we never realized it. And then when we started measuring this whole thing, and then bring the data into a platform, that's when we realized was with all the rainwater harvesting and other liquid discharge facilities we have. So that kind of throws another dimension to it, boss, how much are we spending on water? So there is a connection to every sustainability initiative, either to the productivity or to the longevity of our businesses. I think it is important for the CFOs to really help. Generally, sustainability officer जब भी पास आएगा तो बोलते हैं बॉस ये तो ऐसे ही सुबह से लेके शाम तक कुछ भी बजाता रहता है. ऐसा नहीं है. In fact, when we sit with them, I think I was hearing from another hospital CFO, I think they made a humongous amount of economic advantage out of those sustainability initiatives, simply by looking at how much paper are we consuming in our, either to write prescription or whatever. There is sense in it. Yes, at this point of time, getting all this data into a single sheet is currently a bit of a more manual dependent process, but I think over a period of time, we should be able to build those capabilities. That's not a big deal. And I think it has a lot of economic value, whether we look at it from organization point of view or society at large.
Prabhakar, you wanted to come? Sir? Okay, so any questions coming? Come on. Sustainability, nobody has questions. I'm surprised.
Yes, you can raise your hand. I'll come to you with a microphone. You can introduce yourself and shoot your question.
Okay, we'll wait. So just raise your hand when you have, and we'll try and come to you.
Oh,
okay,
so there's one. Yeah.
Just 1 second.
I'll just
can go there.
I'm coming to you.
Yeah, my name is Vinod Krishnan, part of the CKA Birla Group. I take care of HR and also work on the business front. So one of the things that keeps getting discussed is sustainability. So ESG we do very well because those are the so-called easier hanging fruit. What is your opinion on this entire next generation succession planning, which is mandated by some boards, but we do it very reluctantly. The word succession itself is a stigma. So some people call it second line development. In my head, I call it ascension planning, so change the paradigm and lift the person. What is your view as CFOs, and probably many of you are on the board as well, and how does the board view the people agenda on sustainability?
Who do you want to address your question to?
Open to anyone.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I can. So, RBI prescribes sort of a maximum term for a CEO or executive director for any banking institute. So that ranges between, say, 12 years for a founder, promoter, and then extendable by 3 years further, right? So it is something that we have to do as a bank, and it's a topic which is very close to the regulator, very close to the board, and ultimately very important from wealth preservation or growth perspective from a founder as well in our case, right? So what we have done is we have created a succession plan. There are people who are identified could take over, and they would be groomed, or they are being groomed to take over in 3 to 6 years from time when the CEO or the current executive director's term might expire.
So respect that. The CEO and the MD are the easiest ones to do succession for. There's no problem with that.
No, they are the most difficult ones.
No, the ones which are very difficult are the manufacturing plant head, the regional head of a state. They will never allow for succession to happen. So I just want to see if at a CFO level whether you've thought of that. That's
Okay.
all. Thank you.
You'd like to? Sure.
See, I think that's a very valid point. I mean, at some point of time, people tend to get into those comfort zones and ensure that I will stay here. One interesting experiment that we tried is, for example, there is a sales guy. So sales, then product, then marketing, then region, then again coming back to marketing. This is how a guy has to move. Even in finance, for example, finance has 4 quadrants. You have treasury, you have bookkeeping, you have risk and compliance, so on and so forth. Generally, our tendency, even as a CFO, is, ये बंदा अच्छा कर लेता है accounting standard, करने दो. The moment whatever the level of the leadership is, the moment we actually nudge them a bit and then ask them to take a different curve, which actually enables them to actually reach the top, that's the role of a leader in my understanding. मुझे जब लगता है कि ये बंदा ठीक है तो why should I change him? अगले साल मैं ऑडिटर आके क्वेश्चन पूछेगा, ये तो जवाब दे देगा, मेरे पास नहीं आएगा. The moment we think like that, I will never think about an account guy moving to a treasury. And at least in my whatever little time that I have spent in life, so I have seen at least 3-4 examples when we make that change happen, either by convincing that fellow or through some other means. I think people have really risen the ranks. I think it is important that every leader at every stage, that this whole concept of job rotation, we'll again see the problem with us is for everything we want a method. Method नहीं चाहिए, common sense चाहिए. ठीक है? So the moment you say that बस इस बंदे को इस तरह घुमाएंगे तो अपने आप हो जाएगा. तो ये मेरे ख्याल से, while we can form policy of a job rotation, but it is important for the reader to understand where to rotate this guy. If we do that, I am sure this whole succession it will get addressed, is my view.
Okay. Sir, if you can identify yourself and ask the question, please.
My name is Sai Krishnamurthy. I'm part of Renin Aviation, an upcoming startup. Okay. Very valid point, and it's required at every step in an organization. Okay. But the leader has to be convinced about it. That's the point. At home, we are convinced that, we want our daughter or son to be the successor for us. But if we are not convinced about it in our own roles, we're not going to do it. Again, to Dilly's point, I think it has to come from the leader's mindset.
So the question, sir, please. The question, please.
No, the question, I'm actually adding to his thought process so that he is confident of what we are doing at our levels. I've always done it for last so many years now. Every role I have identified a successor, and it is an advantage for the leader. 100 leaders I have under me, it's an advantage for me. As long as the mindset is changed, it's done.
Fantastic point, absolutely. So the wider question then to everyone now is, you're running the finance function, you're bothered about the ESG, you are bothered about the policymaker, the taxman, single source of truth. Now you're also evaluating, of course, technology, and evaluating the people as well. How do you run the company as, or as a finance leader across so many opportunities, across so many functions? Anyone would like to take that question, please? Gaurav?
So I think we spoke about this at the beginning when Dela Babu, he spoke about it. I think if you understand how value is created in the business, and if you understand how that value shows up in the numbers, right? And all of the aspects that you just described, whether it's, say, the people or sustainability or technology or strategy or business development, whatever these roles, they either fall into, they are at, the how is the value created, who's creating value, and how is the value measured, right? So as long as you continue to focus on those and just use, common sense, you will be able to do that. There's no rocket science about it.
Would you like to add, Delhi?
Every business end of the day, has certain objectives. And when we look at finance as a role, our job is always to do identification of value and identification of inefficiency. These are, to put it very, very crudely, these are predominantly our job to look at it. So if you want to do these things, it's important for us to understand what each other role in the organization is supposed to be doing. So obviously, bringing connection to the value for everything we do, whether it is ESG or whether it is safety related matter or whether it is related to HR training, like Bala was saying. What if you don't do that training? Is training an investment or an expense? That's a big question that we deliberate almost on a daily basis. So our ability to understand and perceive the value of each function, how it contributes for the long-term value creation of the organization is the single most essential point that each CFO has to spend time on. There is no other way to do about it, because at the end of the day, you are signing the bills, and obviously you will question those expenditure for its value that it is bringing onto the table. So understanding these functions and their relevance to the overall business context is what makes that whole thing easy, if we can actually spend time on that. For that, I think we need to have a bit of an understanding of what it takes to get into that role. If I were to become a HR guy, how do I think about that role? Leaving my finance hat aside. So generally in organization, how it is being handled today, these days, at least to my experience, is there is always that apex committee where nobody wears their functional hat while coming into that meeting. Everybody has only the business hat and then come and sit in that meeting. That's where I think you actually be able to understand the other functions' role and give value to them. Otherwise, we know what's the jargon that we use between various functions, right? So that simple thing can actually solve this issue, is my feeling.
Balav, you wanted to come in. So, I'll come to him.
No, so I think both Delhi Babu and Gaurav mentioned that generally I think we enjoy making things complicated. Because somewhere, by making it first complicated and simplifying it, makes us feel important. And I'm just using the word me, I'm sure it also applies to the rest of the organization as well. So common sense, if you apply, most of the things can be easily solved. Today, even what we are doing in our day-to-day work, there is nothing so complicated about it. But it's more about that we don't want to apply common sense. We want to make it first complicated, and then we want to have that adrenaline rush within our body that, okay, first I have solved it, and then I have to have the dopamine rush or something else, whatever is that chemical called. But that is the most important thing which I believe. And in my own career, over 2.5 decades, Big part of my career I have survived on common sense, not necessarily based on understanding all the technical complexities, whether it's finance or accounting or anything of that sort.
Aimakar.
So as finance guys, for me, we have various hats to wear, and particularly when we are engaging with cross-functional teams. We all know we deal with it day in, day out. One is controller role, second is the business partner role. These are the two important things which we need to always wear this hat and flip this hat at the same moment also sometimes. While doing this, the most important part is the empathy. So getting the perspective of the other department and why they are doing it, what they are doing it, what is that they want to achieve, whether it is aligned to the whole organization's objective or not, or strategy or not. These are the things which need to be assessed by the finance guys, and they need to evaluate and take the calls.
Sure.
Meaning, in case if you're a book reader and if you have a chance, please do read a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's a beautiful book. More often than not, we exhaust our energy with what and how versus trying to spend time with why. Moment we are able to ask why, both in terms of what we are doing or why somebody else is doing it, many of the problems will get solved and it will automatically be addressed because there is a natural ownership once you understand the why part of it versus just talking about what and how. So I just wanted to suggest that if your time permits and if interested, please do read that book.
Okay, so since we are towards the bottom part, the latter part of the conversation, the wider question then, and maybe Prabhakar, if you can come in, long-term creating value and short-term creating the flavor to the organization, flavor for the organization. How does, the people here, how do they, balance between the two? Short-term versus the long-term value that you create?
See, it's a philosophical answer, but I'll say leadership is all about walking with head in the clouds, but feet on the ground. So unless we find that balance, we will not be able to execute the roles that we currently are in. So we have to find that balance. But if at any point in time, one has to make a choice between short and long term, the answer is extremely clear. Balo talked about Simon Sinek. He also wrote a second beautiful book called The Infinite Game. I invite you to all read it. You build organizations for a very, very, very long term to create value for at least 4 stakeholders. The clients with whom we work with, the people who work with us, the investors who put their money in us, and the society in which we are currently executing the business. Unless we take a very, very long-term view of the business, we will not be able to satisfy the needs or the requirements of all the 4 stakeholders. So my first point is, it's our job to find the balance, to walk with the head in the clouds and feet on the mud. And second point is, if you have to make a choice between short versus long term, the answer is any day, any time, it has to be long term. Even if it means that in short term, you're going to take the hit of valuation, of criticism, of whatever form of metrics you're going to report, it has to be a long-term driven decision if you have to make a choice.
Delhi, I'd like you to come in, particularly because the sector that you're working in, India is seeing an energy transition, and it's a long-term secular trend that is unfolding in India. You see that change happening and how, adoption of EVs, switching to renewable power, the way a lot more is happening. How do you, while that doesn't need convincing, how would you explain it to an audience here on the need for that long-term view?
Yeah, I think particularly the segment that we are currently operating, investors all the day always come and tell us, I'm a long-term investor with a view of 3 to 4 years. I say, boss, 3 to 4 years long-term nahi hai. So if you want to get into a program like this, where a tectonic technology shift is happening, the whole concept of traction from an engine to a battery, you are storing the energy. That's where the technology shift is
Which has never happened in the history of mankind.
Exactly. See, even the very nature of energy, we all know. Very nature of energy, to keep it in a given place, and then you should allow it to come out only in the proportion that you want. is not easy by very chemistry or whatever nature of science that we are talking about. So whenever organizations are going through this kind of a long journey, which also comes up with one additional risk in the business that we are in. Today it is lithium, tomorrow it is sodium, day after hydrogen, thereafter aluminum fuel cell, in between solid state battery. God only knows which technology I should bet. Now suddenly somebody, I mean in our case it has happened, suddenly we said that boss we got a lithium technology and now we are going to go ahead, but suddenly my share price went somewhere which even I don't know why it did what it did. And then I know that today me signing a technology agreement is not going to make anything different. I mean it takes, you have to absorb, you have to develop. There is a long-term game that is involved in it, but markets are also right in showing that exuberance. Why? Because that's when you also understand as a CFO that boss, this risk is going to get well rewarded by the market, and your ability to mobilize capital. See, after all, what is the job of a CFO? Whenever I am getting into a particular venture, I need to first understand what's the right capital allocation methodology, how much equity, how much debt. It is not about your debt equity formula of 2:1, banker DSCR of 1.2, that's not the point at all. It is based on the inherent risks and rewards that are involved in the business and the changes that the business is going through is how you are going to time your capital allocation. Boss, today I might want to do equity. For example, the way that we often articulate is, the initial risk capital is what I will invest based on my strength that I have. By the time I will hit 1, 2, 3, 4 building blocks, and then I will decide what is the risks involved in the business. Then I have two options: bear the risk, mobilize debt; share the risk, bring a strategic partner. So this constant understanding of how to fund a particular business is a very, very critical role of any CFO for that matter. And secondly, when it comes to the other side on the valuation, because these days we see this unnecessary hikes and lows, while it gives an indication from the market, it is also not right for us to, as a CFO, think that boss, आज मौका अच्छा है, ज़्यादा पैसा मिलेगा market से उठा लो, बाद में figure out करेंगे करना क्या है.
You're reminding me of a few companies which debuted in the markets.
हाँ, वो थोड़ा, I mean, you have to be really careful. See, there is always this question. IB bankers will come and tell you, boss, आज अच्छा है मौसम, उठा ले पैसा. कल जब तुमको चाहिए वो मौसम पता नहीं वो ऐसा रहेगा नहीं रहेगा. See, it's a constant, they're not wrong. See, it's a constant question even a CFO has. Do I know to go to the market when I need the money? Do I go to the market when market is willing to give it to me? It's a question that we have to ask every day. But this is a funding part. This is understanding the external view of your business. This is important. At the same time, on the flip side, when you go there, boss, आज के date में, if you don't drive the internal value, matlab when you don't make your business guys grounded, boss, money wherever it comes from, even if somebody is valuing at 100x, they are not giving you for free. It is important that CFO has to, like he said, it is important not only to keep our feet on the ground, it is also important that we make everyone else actually are walking along with us. Otherwise what happens, whenever you mobilize huge amount of money, there is this exuberance that starts, and then we will start venturing into risky ventures which are going to prove costly. Why? Just because cash is there in the balance sheet. Whenever cash is there in the balance sheet, if you don't understand where from it come, then you end up taking those risky bets and eventually you will have a problem. So the balancing between creating value for the long-term value creation is no rocket science. If you are solving people's problem, long-term value will accrue to you. If you are only telling them, I will solve your tomorrow's problem and something will happen day after tomorrow because of which you value me today, that people will believe, and over a period of time it will meet whatever end that it has to meet. So there is this book by, since people have referred books, I liked Mr. Ashwath Damodaran. There is this narratives and numbers, or stories and numbers. So it's important that a CFO is a good storyteller, at the same time keeps his numbers in mind and then makes his internal organization be grounded. Otherwise, if I'm not able to believe the story or the objective with which my organization is working, if I'm not able to articulate it to people correctly, then I am doing a disservice of not identifying what is the right value of that business. But at the same time, don't run behind only narratives. Keep the numbers in your mind and make your business also walk along with you. That's my sense about it.
You know, after hearing this, one stock comes to mind. You would remember stock price over, IPO price of over 2100. Anyone remembers that? Anyone? Just a guess? Paytm? It is still at 50% of IPO price. 50% of IPO price. And I still remember the CFO then said we could have priced the offering higher. Yeah. So until you leave money on the table for the investor, that story is not complete. Anyway, wider point also for some business like yours, Himika, which is generating enough cash flow with the huge student base that you tap and people that you're skilling. How does the CFO ensure? Some of the people here may be in similar kinds of businesses. How do you make sure that that cash is pumped into either growing the business very aggressively or in new businesses?
So our business per se is very straightforward business. So not very complicated. Build schools, bring children and educate them. So now the complication.
It sounds very simple, but when you talk of the numbers, then it gets complicated.
Yeah, that's where I am getting to. So now, while it sounds so simple, these businesses have very long gestation period and their payback periods are longer. So what we do is that, one, we have a linear way of investing, which are our ongoing current businesses and verticals, where we have organic growth, we are pushing for that growth. And there we deploy cash very carefully, evaluating which are the geographies, which are the locations where we know that we can get the return what we are expecting. At same time, we also evaluate looking at what are the risks and what are the new areas and what we are investing for future. So with this cash at our disposal, we keep balancing this time to time and seeing that where we are investing linearly, how we have to optimize, where we can get the paybacks faster. That becomes very critical for us. While we always look at what are the alternate businesses in the same segment where we need to keep investing for the future readiness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Gaurav, I'd like to come to you, and there's a wider question as well. Indian companies are looking to go global very aggressively, even the smaller companies, if you speak to them. AU, of course, while in that context, you can explain the bigger picture. Going global needs deep pockets, very deep pockets. So if you can explain, paint the picture of the Indian business and how that could unfold. Some of the people here may be very interested to understand your perspective.
So I don't think there is one answer, right? So it depends.
Yeah,
on
your perspective.
Yeah, so it depends on which industry you're operating in, and what is your core competence or what is your edge over others in that scaling, and whether that requires physical infrastructure or whether that could be something you could build from India but scale for the world digitally, as some of the companies have done from here. But I would think that India obviously has huge scale domestically as well. So if you're going outside India, then you need to be creating value for your shareholders, right? And what is the kind of investment required? Is that something that you have available? What is the ROI on that business versus your domestic business? And then do you want to scale, right? And also it's not a static analysis, because your risk rewards would change. How much of your balance sheet or free capital cash flow you want to allocate that. So it becomes a very complicated Excel. But at the end of the day, I think the simple thing is, if you think that there is an edge for you and you can carve out a niche or carve out a market where you can create value for your shareholders and other stakeholders, then that's the stuff you should go for. But there are lots of nuances. And how do you scale talent? If it's physical infrastructure, are you familiar with the socio-cultural aspects of the areas you're going to operate in, etc.?
So why I asked that question is, if you've read the news recently, Sun Pharma, and we are speaking in Hyderabad, so that name is important. Sun Pharma is looking to make an acquisition in the US worth about $10 billion. 2 decades ago, if you remember Vodafone, they bought the telecom company, SR, I forget the name of the company, SR Group company, whatever that was. And then Hutch, correct. And similarly, Airtel bought MTN they didn't buy. They bought the African company, I forget the name. Again, 9 billion. So that scale is now coming up. That kind of number we are talking, and it's not a small number, 10 billion. And that's why I wanted to speak from the CFO lens, the culture part of it. Again, something very new. May not have been on your agenda at this scale earlier. So that's the last question of mine. Anyone would like to comment about the challenges you'd face? While the balance sheet may justify it, the culture may be the challenge.
Yeah, obviously, I heard a few things about this from another functional leader in a different industry. See, India definitely offers that kind of scale advantage where you have already built and then you have understood the business to its core. Today, we export batteries to roughly about 60 to 80 countries. And we are now trying to see what else value addition we can do in those countries. But one important thing I always come across with whatever small things that we have done, not of the scale that we are talking about, I think understanding the other country's culture is going to be a very, very important aspect, because some of the acquisitions that at least recently the ex-CFO, Mr. Parsardi, has came out a book with called M&A. I mean, a lot of examples, live cases where things have really failed purely on account of culture. Even he was referring to an acquisition of another company where they clearly said, when they acquired, they went and said, we are not here to change your culture. We are not here to impose our culture onto this organization. So we would like to take that integration story a bit slow and then allow that other company also to actually think that they can actually become part of us over a period of time. There were many such examples. I mean, even when Tata's acquired the Korean company, I think the first thing that the senior management of Tata's did was went and had the first meeting itself, they wanted to go and sit with the workers and then sit in the same canteen where workers eat. I mean, these kind of things will send certain soft signals, which I think makes the seller a lot more comfortable in selling those businesses. That I think has been a phenomenal emphasis has been placed. At least I've heard 3-4 leaders talking about it. The other part is obviously when we go into another country, another gentleman mentioned, it's understand the political dynamics of that country, very, very important. For example, we went into our own neighboring countries. At least one country we went in, and then we also, CFO's role is also to understand the macroeconomic environment and then relate it to the business. I mean, we keep asking, rupee kahan jayega, gold kahan jayega, ya equity market kahan. This is something that we do, but the science behind this, the macroeconomic story or geopolitical story, how do we understand it and then relate it to our business? For example, when we went into a country, we realized though it was 100% backed by an Indian bank and then it was all 100% secured, and then somehow that CFO thought we should also take a political risk policy. So they have taken that policy and then which proved to be right maybe about a year later, that things went into the way that it went. So I think these are the things, again, CFO has to think about what are those risk mitigation strategies that we need to put in place, particularly when we are going into multicultural and multi-geographical limits. I think I'll stop there. I think there are multiple other perspectives that will come in. But anyway, these are the 2-3 things that I heard from other leaders, and I thought I'd share it.
Just Ashutosh, if I can add to that, right? So on M&A, for example, unless you're creating more value, it's just a transfer of value to the shareholders, right? So if you go in and buy another company, you have paid the price for what it's worth plus a premium on top for seller to part with its assets, right? So unless you are creating incremental value by either expanding the market more than what the company alone could have done, or you're taking costs out, or you're building a bigger moat for your business, right? So what is the strategic rationale for doing that acquisition? If that value creation is not clear, just by I will buy that company, I'll finance it with debt, I'll become bigger, that's a recipe for disaster. That story we have seen thousands of times across the world. So what is the alpha I'm adding, right, to my business, to the combined business? If I'm taking costs out, that needs to be very clear. And then in the context of the socio-cultural, the political, and the industry and macro, and in that context.
Prabhakar, you wanted to add? And you know, as I hear, it's so fascinating. What is that the CFO doesn't consider?
Okay, on the M&A piece, I'll just add 2 more bullet points. So the first is, as a company, we've done 28 M&As in the last 25 years, so I can speak with some degree of experience in that. We've always looked at 3 things: the maths, the physics, the chemistry. The numbers should add up. The business should be in the same area or adjacent area or in the strategic landscape of where you're going towards. That's the physics part. It always looks good in a PowerPoint. The value chain works really well in a PowerPoint. You have to just kick the tires and see if it really does. Third part is the chemistry. The chemistry of the organization, especially the sellers. If the chemistry of the value system doesn't really match, there's no way in which this deal is going to work. In my own personal example, the last deal I have done was about 2 years ago. The company was in Portugal, Lisbon. I went to meet the 2 sellers. We had a meeting the next day morning, but they came to meet me for a dinner the evening before. We went for a dinner. We spent about 3 hours. By the time I came out, I was clear. We were going to do the deal. The rest of it is all reconfirmation of the maths and physics. So chemistry matters a lot. The culture matters a lot. The second thing that I'll say on this regard is there's a lot of temptation for many companies from many parts of the world, including India, that when we acquire a company elsewhere, we tend to export our talent there, managerial talent, so to speak. I think one has to resist that. It's important to operate within the context, to find good local leaders who can actually work in a global context, of which there will be many in the country in which we are going to operate in, and have them manage their businesses, and use Indian talent only for the bridging purposes. There are roles where you have to deploy global talent. There are roles where you have to just send people from India to make sure things happen, but not the critical leadership roles which rightfully belong to the country in which we do the acquisition. We have to resist the temptation. Only 2 things I'll add.
Sure. Hamika, you wanted to add, and maybe that's the final point.
So cultural transformation, that's the most important thing which in M&A we don't put a value to that. Okay, we don't put a number, we don't put a value to that. That becomes very critical. In my experience, I worked in GCC, that is Middle East, for 10 years. Most of the companies which looked at Southeast Asia as a big market and they need to expand big time, it's a big opportunity lying there. Most of the companies which they went there, who had people from Indian background or African background, most of them failed there in Southeast Asia. I know the companies, they failed miserably only because they couldn't understand the culture of the Southeast Asian economies and how their culture is, how the behavior pattern is, what are the working pattern, when do they come to work, when do they take a nap, and what is the speed of execution. And those aspects are never considered in their M&A, and ultimately, finally, it came and bit them very badly.
Okay.
And just add, so ours is a Swedish company, and from early 2000s, we would have done 200 plus acquisition. Of course, I was not with the organization, but one thing which the organization has done is that they have not, while they have acquired companies, but they have not integrated companies. Most of the companies have been left to operate while they are part of Hexagon group of companies, but they still run as independent organization, as a division within the Hexagon group of companies. part of the reason, of course, is not to take away their core way of operating in terms of the way they are functioning, their own culture, their own go-to-market strategy. But along with that, one of the most important thing was the brand. That moment because they were all having a great footprint of the brand in their respective markets. Moment you try to integrate and subsume the company into your own organization, you lose the power of the brand that has been created over the years. So I just wanted to bring, because we were talking about culture and all, but brand also plays a very big role in terms of the buying entity or the selling entity, in terms of how do you play in the marketplace.
Okay. Well, we'll just end here. Just one last point, since Prabhakar, you mentioned it. You didn't use the word, but since he was talking chemistry, Valentine's Day is around the corner. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us.